The lights dimmed, the applause faded, and for a moment, all that filled the room was the sound of Dakota Johnson's trembling breath. She stood behind the microphone, her elegant gown shimmering under the soft golden glow of the stage. What was supposed to be a simple farewell speech was about to become one of the most talked about moments in Hollywood. She smiled politely at the audience, but there was something different about her eyes, a kind of fragile warmth, the look of someone standing on the edge of goodbye. "This journey has meant everything to me," she began, her voice steady but soft. "It changed me in ways I never expected, and some people along the way changed me the most." The crowd leaned in, and then she said it, the name no one thought she would mention again. Jamie. It was only one word, but it was enough to silence a room full of hundreds. For years, Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan had been the center of endless speculation, the undeniable chemistry between them, the laughter that never looked rehearsed, the kind of connection that couldn't be faked. They had both denied any off-screen romance, but the world never believed them. And now, with that single name spoken on stage, every rumor, every headline, every lingering question came rushing back. Dakota paused, her lips curving into a wistful smile. "Some people," she continued, "leave your life, but they never really go away." The audience gasped, then broke into gentle applause, unaware of the quiet storm behind her words. Jamie Dornan wasn't in the room that night, but his presence was everywhere, in the tension, in the nostalgia, in the tears she was trying not to let fall. Later, reporters would describe it as a goodbye disguised as gratitude. But for those who knew Dakota, it was more than that. It was closure. The kind you give when words have been left unsaid for too long. Backstage, moments after her speech, someone asked if she had planned to mention Jamie. She smiled faintly. "No," she whispered, "it just came out." But everyone could tell. That wasn't an accident. It was emotion. Real, raw, and unfiltered. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to go back to where it all began. When 50 Shades of Grey first started filming, Dakota was 24, young, brave, and determined to prove she was more than a Hollywood surname. Jamie, already married, was guarded, careful, but deeply kind. The two built an unspoken trust on set. In a world of bright lights and judgmental eyes, they found comfort in each other's understanding. Years later, Dakota would call that time the most intense experience of her life. "You have to trust your scene partner completely," she once said in an interview. "And I trusted Jamie with everything." That trust grew into a bond that outlived the trilogy itself. Even when the cameras stopped rolling, their connection never truly faded. There were photos of them laughing during interviews, glancing at each other mid-sentence, finishing each other's thoughts. For fans, it was undeniable. Something real lingered between them. But fame is rarely kind to bonds like that. The rumors, the scrutiny, the constant dissection of every gesture, it wore them down. Jamie retreated into his private life with his wife and children, while Dakota buried herself in work, moving from film to film, carrying a quiet ache that no one could quite name. Years passed. They rarely saw each other. But in every interview, whenever one of them was asked about the other, there was always a pause, the kind filled with memory. Dakota once said, "I'll always have a lot of love for Jamie. He's family to me." It was a simple line, but now, looking back, it sounded like a goodbye she wasn't ready to say. And so, when she stood on that stage years later, older, wiser, more open, her voice broke for a reason. Because she wasn't just saying farewell to a chapter in her career. She was saying farewell to the version of herself that still held onto that quiet connection. As the ceremony ended, cameras flashed and music played, but Dakota stood alone for a moment behind the curtain, staring at the empty stage. Her makeup was perfect, but a single tear slipped down her cheek anyway. Someone asked softly, "Are you okay?" She smiled, that bittersweet, unmistakably Dakota smile, and said, "Yes. It just felt like the end of something beautiful." And maybe, in that moment, the world finally understood. It wasn't scandal, it wasn't rumor. It was love, in its purest, most human form. Jamie Dornan didn't see Dakota's farewell speech live that night. He was thousands of miles away, filming in Europe. But within hours, his phone began to buzz with messages. "She mentioned you. You have to see this. It's all over the internet." At first, he ignored it. He had spent years learning to stay detached from headlines. Most of them were noise. But when his wife Amelia sent him a quiet text that simply read, "You should watch this one," he knew it was different. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Jamie opened his laptop. The video had already gone viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. The clip showed Dakota on stage, her soft tone, the glimmer in her eyes, and that one line, "He'll always have a piece of my story." He watched it twice, then 3 times. The first time, he smiled. The second time, he felt something twist deep inside his chest. By the third, he had to close the screen. "She didn't have to say that," he whispered to himself. But even as he said it, a faint, almost melancholic smile appeared. Because he knew, Dakota never said anything she didn't mean. For years, Jamie and Dakota had lived in a delicate balance. 2 people bound by a connection they couldn't fully explain, but one that never really faded. It wasn't a love story written for tabloids. It was quieter, more complicated, built on respect, trust, and something unspoken that hovered between them long after the cameras stopped rolling. He once described her as one of the most important people in my career. But what he never said publicly was that she was also one of the few people who truly understood him, the pressures, the fear, the loneliness that come with being watched by millions. When 50 Shades ended, so did their daily closeness. They both went on to new roles, new lives. But every now and then, their paths would cross. A text on birthdays, a quick phone call after a movie release, a rare dinner with mutual friends. And every time, it felt like no time had passed at all. That's why the speech hit him so hard. Because even though they had drifted apart, hearing her speak his name with that same warmth reminded him that what they shared, friendship, affection, understanding, had never really disappeared. The next day, tabloids swarmed. Dakota Johnson's emotional confession to Jamie Dornan. Hollywood reacts to her tearful goodbye. Reporters called Jamie's reps for comments, but as always, he stayed silent. Privately, though, those close to him said he wasn't the same that week. One friend described it as bittersweet nostalgia. He spent hours walking alone after filming, listening to music, lost in thought. He didn't want to talk about Dakota, not because of discomfort, but because the memories were still alive, fragile, and sacred. A few days later, an interviewer gently asked Jamie about the speech. He hesitated for a long time before answering. "I think, when someone says something from the heart, you just have to be grateful you were part of their journey," he said. "Dakota's one of a kind. I'll always wish her the best." His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed him. The internet replayed that clip endlessly, fans dissecting every blink, every sigh. But what no one realized was that Jamie's emotion wasn't about longing, it was about acceptance. Back in Los Angeles, Dakota finally addressed the buzz around her speech in a magazine interview. She smiled when asked about Jamie. "It wasn't about the past," she said. "It was about gratitude. Some people walk beside you through storms without asking for anything in return. Jamie did that for me. He always did." Her honesty struck a chord with fans who had spent years romanticizing their connection. Suddenly, it wasn't about scandal or lost love. It was about something deeper. Appreciation for a bond that shaped them both in ways words could never capture. Later that month, Jamie and Dakota unexpectedly reunited at a private charity gala in London. When photographers spotted them, there was a brief silence, followed by a frenzy of flashing lights. But unlike years before, there was no tension, no awkwardness. Just 2 old friends greeting each other with a quiet, genuine hug. They talked for a few minutes, smiling, laughing softly. Not about the past, but about life now. To everyone watching, it was the closure the world didn't know it needed. As they parted ways, someone overheard Dakota saying softly, "Take care of yourself, Jamie." And he replied with a simple, "You too, kid." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was real. Because sometimes, love doesn't end in heartbreak or scandal. Sometimes, it simply transforms, from passion into peace, from closeness into gratitude. Later, in a rare reflective moment, Jamie would tell a friend, "She'll always have a small place in my heart. That's not something time can erase." And maybe that's what Dakota had meant all along when she said her farewell. That some stories don't need a sequel. They just need to be remembered for what they were: beautiful, fleeting, and true.